Six Flags St. Louis is an amusement park in Eureka, Missouri that is part of the Six Flags chain, which is arguably the worst of the major amusement park chains. Their St. Louis park is generally considered to be at the lower end of the chain, and it happens to be my home park. I've been going here all of my life, so I know the park very well. It has a pretty bad reputation, but is it deserved? I am here to answer that question from a home parker's perspective. I will be talking about all of the pros and cons that I find with the park, so let's get going with our first pro. The non-coaster ride collection is great. The park has many various thrilling flat rides and more gentle family rides, but they all complement each other well and cause a nice overall lineup. Some of the more notable ones are Colossus, the Ferris wheel, Dragon's Wing, an upcharge sky coaster, Fireball, a Larson loop, Supergirl, a Zamperla Endeavor, Sky Screamer, a Funtime Starflyer, Spinsanity, a Zamperla Disco, Superman, an Intamin Drop Tower, and the most unique of them all, Excalibur, a whack and awesome spinning flat ride. Some of them may be common, but they are great for the most part and possibly the best overall collection of the park, which leads us into our first con, the coaster lineup. If there was a true standout coaster, this might be a pro, but as it stands, we have a solid lineup of supporting coasters. Unfortunately, you can only ride them so many times before they lose some appeal. Sure, American Thunder has some good airtime, and Boss has an incredible night ride, but the no doubt best coaster in the park is missing. It barely makes this side of the pros and cons list, but after coming here so many times, the coasters become forgettable. The next pro is the nice entrance. When you walk into a park, you want it to give you a nice feeling. You want it to have a nice atmosphere. The entrance and main plaza area of the park does this wonderfully. It has some older style buildings that look very nice, and the fountain centerpiece adds to it. Off to the right is a beautiful B&M, and it is great. And then you walk through the rest of the park. The second con is the lack of a nice atmosphere after the entrance. It is concrete and blacktop city, and there are ads everywhere. In general, the park just doesn't give a nice vibe. It's not like it feels unsafe or anything, but it just isn't nice. It's one thing when a park is having an off day, but Six Flags St. Louis is like this all the time. The third pro is actually the operations. Of course it isn't all the time because the ride apps differ, but for the most part, St. Louis is very good at dispatching trains quickly. On the Boss in particular, it's not completely rare to see 30 or 40-second dispatches. Like any park, it's not perfect, but I have to admit that they are pretty good at quickly loading trains here. The next con is the lack of good food options. This is going to be a bit more difficult for me to talk about since I have never actually eaten at the park, but just from seeing the choices, it's all pretty mediocre. There's Chop 6, which Timberwolf Aaron claims is quite good, and of course there's a Johnny Rocket, which is like diner fast food style, but aside from that it's pretty generic and meh. Turkey legs, but they probably aren't great and really aren't my thing anyway. Fresh Cafe that rarely has people waiting for it, and aside from that it's burgers, chicken, and fries. This is the case with most chain amusement parks, but it wouldn't hurt to have some kind of different restaurant. For example, Cedar Fair parks generally have a Chick-fil-A. Because of how limited the food options are and how expensive everything is, it really is a big downside of the park. The final pro is the employees, specifically on American Thunder and the Boss. All of the rides have okay ops, but the two best coasters in the park, in my opinion, are by far the best as far as employees go. They always seem so energetic and excited, and the ops generally don't staple as long as you aren't too obvious about getting some extra room. Especially if you can catch a night ride on the Boss, the atmosphere is excellent and the ops are just as happy as the guests, although that may just be because they know their shift is about to end. Either way though, the vibe that these two crews give off is great, and always makes me excited to ride. Now we have two more cons, which obviously will offset the amount of pros and cons, with the cons just slightly pulling it down. First is the lack of shade throughout the park. St. Louis weather is whack, man, and you will want a nice shady place to rest on a hot summer day. However, there is very little greenery and other places to shield you from the sun. There are a couple small tunnels, but they are quite spread apart throughout the park. Not to mention the blacktop paths, which add to the problem by soaking up all the heat and sending it up at you. It's kinda awful, and leads to you going home feeling sweaty and nasty. Finally, there are ads everywhere. This is a common theme of Six Flags parks, but of the ones I have been to, it is by far the worst in St. Louis. It seems like anytime you turn a corner, an ad is just shoved into your face. Ninja even used to run with an ad on one of its trains. I understand that advertisement brings in more money, but seriously, I don't want to buy Takis or your stupid refillable cup. It is just extremely annoying to constantly see ads for things that you couldn't care less about. Aside from just pros and cons, there are a few other things worth mentioning. 1. Ninja is trash. 2. When you come to this park, expect to be doing some hiking. The entire place is on a slight incline, and is especially noticeable in the back, where the paths get steeper and you find yourself climbing more sets of stairs. I'm a runner myself, so I have fairly strong legs and it doesn't bother me, but it is something to be aware of. 3. The park layout is very simple and hard to get lost in. It is literally one big loop, and all of the attractions are very easy to find. Even if you take a wrong turn, you'll end up at the location you intended to get to eventually. The only slightly confusing part is the area in between Ninja and Batman. There's a fork and it's kinda hard to see that there's a path to the left, but even if you go straight, it's a short path that ends into the deadliest dead end ever, Ninja's entrance. 4. Don't expect theming. Mr. Freeze has some cheap theming in the station and queue, and of course Batman has a bit, but it's very little and nothing to write home about. 5. Come here with friends if you can. Solo is still enjoyable, but nowhere near as good without people to laugh and talk with. 6. Don't come in with super high expectations. It is far from the best park out there, so don't think that. 7. Just have fun. Marathon the best coasters in the park, do whatever you want within reason, as long as you are having a good time. This really can be a solid park, as long as you don't try to make it seem awful. With that, this video has come to a close. Please feel free to leave a comment down below of your thoughts on Six Flags St. Louis and Eureka, Missouri, and this video. Do you have anything to add to what I said, or do you disagree? Please leave all of those thoughts down in the comments, and I'd love to hear them. Also, if you are new, please consider subscribing, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.